12 blindfold games for 3 hours and cycled 22 kilometers while doing that. After that, he played another classical game in the 7th round of the 3rd Mumbai International Chess Tournament. So, we have with us straight from the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Timur Gareyev. Welcome, Timur.
Thank you.
So, tell us how you managed all of these things. You played 12 blindfold games and then cycled 22 kilometers while doing that, and then played another classical game, which was about to get pretty complicated with opposite winged castles. So, yes, please tell us.
Well, the blindfold match indeed was pretty tough. So um, as I started the match, at times you get some easier games here and there, but in this match there were no soft spots. So a lot of the games, a lot of the players, even if I was close to getting a little advantage, or trying to trick them, they were able to defend and kept it solid. And when you have that many games going on at the same time, with the added stress of your tournament game coming up, so you're trying to play quicker and you expect things to go faster, but as players start resisting, the best way to go about it is just to relax, let go, and take your time with it.
So, you had barely 20 minutes before the start of your round, and you managed to pull it off. Can you tell us what happened in the game?
Well, um, as far as the game goes, certainly I did experience the match. I did experience that overwhelming sensation of just finishing a blindfold match. But I was betting that possibly the flow of playing blindfold chess, which generally has that positive effect of being able to focus, because you have to be very focused. I had a bit of a challenge today, to be honest, to switch between the games, play as quick, and once again, because of the strength of the opposition. And same with my match today. Not only that my opponent was quite strong, 2300 level player, he also knew the trick to the opening we played. So a lot of times with Trompowsky, you can expect to pose some new questions to your opponents. But in this case, my opponent actually played a game in this very system, and I imagine he went over the game and took it further. So as I played the opening, all of a sudden the position that I analyzed, and which at times is almost worse than not knowing something. It's like you're trying to remember. And as I tried to remember, I knew that I was supposed to have a little edge in the situation, but every variation that I looked at, it just wasn't so great. So I guess I'll play it over the board.
Yes, please.
So as we played the Trompowsky, my opponent moved the knight forward, bishop f4. So this is all the good solid ideas up to e4, which is the move I faced myself with black. I faced this position, I faced this challenge with black. I didn't take the pawn. And I had players who accepted the pawn sacrifice and who played, possibly more like French style, or the way my opponent played with c5 today, which is definitely a worthwhile strategy. In this situation, I took a moment to see, to check for opportunities, but I did know that the position with knight on c3 should work out pretty good for me, betting on the fact that after cd, queen d4, knight coming out to c6, I can pin the knight over on c6, and I still have quite a bit of pressure in the middle. Now the problem is my queen is advanced and is just placed right there in the middle, where the knight is targeting. So either a6 or bishop d7, the way my opponent played, forces me to trade the bishop for the knight. In the case of bishop c6, I don't want to open the position by trading, and there's not much I can do but just push and lock it up. After knight d7, taking the pawn on d5 would be pretty bad, because after knight d5, either e6 or queen a5 with followed by bishop c5 just leaves black with way too much counterplay, as well as I think direct knight e5. Well, let's see, knight e5, maybe a long castle here. So, but even here, I'd imagine black equalizes fairly easy. If black plays e6, then black potentially gets a very dangerous counterplay. So neither one of those options appealed to me too much. e6 at times works, but in a situation like this, with queen b6 idea and then further e5, in certain situations, I just cannot make that sacrifice work. So I ended up just developing my knight, which, you can be sure it would be the best move. But after e6, in this situation, having spent some time on the opening already, just to clarify, I had I had about an hour and 15 minutes in this situation. And believe it or not, I just kept thinking and thinking and thinking. I was down 45 minutes, and I still didn't have a decision in front of me. I'm anticipating, obviously, the bishop coming out to c5, and as I do so, I kind of want to get a situation where I would trade the dark square bishops and then place my knight over to d4, then either castle short or long, and then maintain a good central balance. But I just couldn't get anything that would even closely resemble that kind of situation. Finally, having spent about 45 minutes thinking, I still didn't have a solution. So I actually stood up and then went to take a break when I used the restroom. Then then I got back and kept thinking, and then I was like, okay, well, you gotta play a move. And then I ran into the move that I actually went over. It's insane that I actually went over. I analyzed the situation. So I play queen e3, bishop comes out to c5, knight d4. So as I thought about this prior, in a situation like this, black's potential counterplay with f6 could be quite dangerous. But actually, I have a pretty good control, and generally taking over on e6 or coming through to e6 either with a queen or the knight, even though everything is pinned, should work out just fine for me, at least in the meanwhile. So bishop c5, knight over to d4, my opponent castles, and here I got a castle long. So I do have a pretty decent control over e5. I don't have to worry about f6 so much right away, at least. But the problem is my opponent's knight coming out to b6. So this is the kind of counterplay that I just didn't feel like b3 would be the move. But as I started to remember my analysis, I realized that indeed that's the way to play. And I guess there's some logic to this situation at hand. I do have a pretty good grasp on the center. Black's knight is just a little bit out of place, which my opponent aims to resolve in the next few moves. But before then, black obviously is going to want to try to take advantage of white's weaknesses on the queen side. So as soon as a5 happens, I respond with a4 immediately. And this is where my opponent plays a pretty good idea. He moves the knight over to c8, aiming to shift it over to e7, possibly f5, and then the queen is coming out over to b6. At which point I get my king out of the way, preparing possibly some tactics with knight c6, knight e6, which wouldn't work right away. In this situation, knight e7 was possibly the best opportunity, since knight takes c6, bishop over to e3, knight d8, getting the queen, bishop over to f4, knight takes b7, bishop e5, and actually black is better. So I still don't have the threat of knight c6 or knight e6. So possibly knight e7 or knight a7 possibly are a couple of good choices for black. As soon as my opponent played queen b6, which works just fine, I realized that I had that plan that I've been looking for, as I considered this position. Now, my idea would be to put the bishop over to e3 and then anticipate the opportunity. So for one, I can solidify the center, and considering the queen is over on b6, I have d4 really nice and solid. I could give d4 a little bit extra support. I can centralize and then aim to trade the dark squares. Since my opponent doesn't have much of an attack on the queen side, you could consider this as a pretty good solid advantage. Now, as soon as I played queen d3, now was my opponent's time to think. He decided that after all, after about 20 or more minutes of thinking, he realized that his best bet was to try and play this opposite color bishop complex endgame, since he still got the knights and still got the rooks on the board. And knight a7 was quite a creative effort by my opponent, trying to go potentially with b5. But the trick is black could also transpose towards getting the knight over to c6 and then push with f6. And that could also be quite dangerous for me in certain cases where black would get a lot of good play and potentially take over the middle. Here, this is where I noticed a nice tactical idea. So I played bishop e3, and in the case where my opponent plays b5, by the way, if any scenario that you know, let's say I move my rook, I trade the bishop for the knight, I transfer the knight over to d4, the rook over on e1. This kind of position would just be hopeless. This is a classical bad bishop versus a good knight. So this is one of the outcomes I'm pursuing. So as I play bishop e3, let's say if b5 is played, I have rook over to g4 with the potential of playing bishop h6, attacking black's king side, and also targeting that knight on a7. So in a situation like h5, for example, rook h4, now I'm attacking, I'm getting a very good attack, plus I'm hitting that knight, which could get me in a strategically winning situation. So having this in mind, my opponent also realized that he had to do something quick, and he played a very, very good f6. In this situation, I cannot possibly hold the center because my opponent gets a lot of play against this e5 square. So I have to trade, and this is, I believe, where my opponent missed out on the opportunity to take over and play some tactic. So e5 with the idea of d4, I thought would be very interesting, very strong. fg doesn't really do white any good because d4 is going to be coming very strong. I could get a lot of pawns for it. I could move my rook, retreat the bishop, get e5. So any of those scenarios, definitely would have been thinking. And you know, you get 3 or maybe even, let's see, 3, maybe even 4 pawns, right? Looks like, yeah, you could possibly get as many as 4 pawns for the piece. But you know, obviously all of this stuff would be quite double-edged. I could also play rook d5 and sacrifice an exchange, which would be very interesting. But I think e5 was definitely worthwhile for my opponent. He played gf, which wasn't bad. I made this check. I realized I had to act quick before my opponent takes over the middle. And as king f7 was played, I played bishop c5. So now I'm trying to keep an eye on the knight on a7 and possibly come in. For example, after rook c8, I have bishop b6. But this was one of the best opportunities for black, where he could have possibly sacked the pawn on a5 and then try to take over the middle, and then get active with b5 in certain situation, maybe d4 first, and then b5 idea at some point. So I believe, I don't think I would have held the advantage in this situation, but as soon as after bishop b6, my opponent, well, I played bishop c5. As soon as my opponent plays rook g8, I end up getting a very good play with first restricting black's push in the middle. If e5 is played for black, then the pawns get weak and I can start attacking him in combination with the knight on a7, chronically weak. And then the only way for black to activate is c8. The pawns in the middle are just not ready to push forward. Now the challenge is, as soon as black plays king f7, I got rook d1 with the idea of f5, and despite the opposite color bishop, as soon as I get a situation where I weaken the d5, even if black can defend it, I now start hitting all the weaknesses. Every one of the pawns on the board for black is just about all of them are weak. A bunch of the squares are weak, and the opposite color bishops almost makes it a better scenario for white. So as my opponent plays so rook d1, so f4, king f7, let's see, so knight c8 my opponent played. and as I played rook d1, my opponent played b6, kicking my bishop out. So in this situation, I had about 15-20 minutes left, and I thought of either bishop f2, keeping an eye on the queen side, or bishop a3, cutting the knight away from defending. And I settled on bishop a3, considering certain endgame situations. So for example, rook a7, f5, and I believe that's kind of what my opponent should have played. So knight d5. Now I'm hitting f6, and in this situation, I guess knight f4 would make this look very, very unpleasant for black, considering black's queen side is quite weak. The pawns f6 and f5 just not looking so great. So like essentially, white's got an extra pawn, but possibly this was my opponent's best choice and tried to hold on a situation like this. Now, instead, my opponent decided to try to hold by setting up a stone wall, so to speak. So he prevented my counterplay by playing f5, but this didn't work out well at all. Now I'm transferring my knight over to e2, and this is the position where I realized that if my opponent does play f5, my bishop on a3 is a lot stronger than just having it over on f2, and as you can see, it will start and connect into the attack very shortly. So bishop d7. Here I didn't look for it, but apparently c4 was very strong, activating my pieces and really playing for attack. And I believe it is indeed almost winning. But I'm actually quite happy with the way I played as well. I just played rook d3, trying to hit black's king. At which point, my opponent was already, is using up his time, and he just couldn't find anything a useful plan. I guess rook a7 is a good idea, rationally so, but try to activate the rook, but there's just no time to put it in a decent position. So I first make a check, I would imagine, king over to f7, so I can start attacking the h7 pawn here. I can play bishop b2, aiming to penetrate, and then at least pick up the h7 pawn. Another scenario, knight coming out to d4, and if knight e7, then I trade the knight. This is where bishop a3 idea comes out very strong. In the same scenario with the bishop on f2, knight could come into d6 and e4, and that could really help black. But the knight cut off, knight e7, I trade him, rook g7 coming in, and slowly I would execute the idea of knight coming out to f3, followed by knight e5, and this is just really getting it's really getting frustrating for black to try to play this kind of position. It's just completely losing. Yeah. With the checkmates coming and black's king getting trapped. So this is the kind of scenario that ultimately my opponent fell into, and realizing the strategic the unavoidable, so to speak, circumstance of strategic pressure, he just resigned after it was obvious that he was going to lose at least one pawn, and then more was to come.
Yeah. So quite an intriguing game this was, I have to say. But what I also wanted to ask you along with this is that you cycled while doing your blindfold sessions. Now, one thing that has been raised several times is to conserve energy before your game. You went for a complicated line. Mm-hmm. After having cycled 22 kilometers. Did that not drain you down, or how did you manage to keep up your energy levels?
Well, generally, I do see, I hear the chess players say, let's say let's go for a walk. Right? You make a suggestion, let's go for a walk, or let's play some sports, and they're gonna be on the side. It's like, oh, I wanna save the energy, right? To so I have more energy for the tournament, right? But the energy you generate a lot of times is you generate, like you make more money by using money, right? It's the same way. It's like you generate energy by using that energy. You expand on it, right? You get more energy by using the energy. By moving around, and that's the way our bodies are shaped. The more we move, the more we expand on the aerobic energy. We move around. So like biking, for example, I feel like it helps me maintain a good concentration. Just the same way you could also have an expensive car like Ferrari, right? And you put it in a garage and you have it there for a year or two. You try starting it again, or like motorcycle, nice motorcycle you have. Try starting it after a year of just sitting in the garage. What's gonna happen to it, right? So whereas you would take it for a ride every other day, it'll keep itself in shape. Same way, we gotta expand on our energy. Like try and do this. 20 push-ups next day, 25 push-ups. 100 pull-ups. Just build up your stamina. Go for a marathon run, but build up to it by slow steps, and then multiply, right? And then next time you take that same challenge, it could be for a person out of shape. They may go to, I would say, a classic example is when people come out to Vegas. They're thinking, well, we're gonna stay at a nice hotel. I'm gonna enjoy the spa. I'm gonna enjoy the buffet. But guess what happens? They end up walking for kilometers and kilometers. It's huge, all this like convention spaces to go from one end of the casino, from the rooms over to like your favorite bar, and like you'll go like a kilometer sometimes. So a lot of times in Vegas is a lot of walking, so you see a lot of those people like just, oh man, like they're tired, they're exhausted. So but it ends up ultimately building you up. It's like whatever you start, actually walking is one of the best exercises. The same way when I use the bike, I don't really kill myself, with trying to get the most out of it. I just get a nice flow. When you get that nice sustainable activity over the course of say 45 minutes to an hour, you actually get more blood flow, and then you engage that marathon-like sensation. You engage that marathon mechanism where you have that constant flow of energy, and I think it only improves your performance intellectually.
All right. And what's the role of apples and other fruits in your routine?
Oh, I say fruit is the quick energy. They say, potentially for people trying to maybe like build the muscle, get bigger, get stronger, or generally, like fruit is it's debatable whether it's like the best form of diet because it's just quick energy. But then if you're using a lot of energy, you may as well replenish it with fruit. It's quick. Just you feel alive instead of like, for example, coffee or some sugary stuff, right? Which this is kind of what fruit is. It's got sugar, but it's got that natural sugar. And then if you want to take it to the next level, then you add some vegetables to it. You add some good fibers. You get some good proteins. Some nuts. This generally actually have like a set of snacks. During my world record event, I had a good friend who came out and he made some fresh squeezed juices. Some like lots of cool stuff. He actually brought like a bowl of hot peppers. I tried one. Which I'd normally do. Like maybe have a piece of ginger or like some wasabi, and I'm like, all right, okay, I'll try it. I'll have this hot pepper. I took a bite of it. I put it back, and then I'm like, I have this bowl in front of me, and I'm like. They're like, why did they bring this bowl of hot peppers? And that was just a joke,
So, do you eat and drink often while playing tournaments?
Water, you have to constantly drink water, because that's your brain. At times, you got to take breaks. Today I didn't take any breaks.
Yeah.
It's good to take a break. It'll help you restore a little bit, get outside the challenge at hand. Just kind of distance yourself, and then things get a little bit smoother. I feel like.
Okay. I asked you the fruit question because when you came in with an apple, and we've seen you often having a fruit or something. So, and you also suggested that fruits give you quick energy. So, is it something like Popeye having spinach for you while when you have apples?
Yeah, it's good. During the game, that could definitely give you the added the added energy, like a new boost of energy. But you also got to figure out what works for you. Like during the game, before the game, after an round. Um, it's tempting to sometimes to just kind of like just eat whatever you like. Maybe thinking, considering the kind of nutrition that would help you the most. Good fats. This is something we spoke about, had a bit of a discussion. Just good fats in your diet. Considering that your brain consists of 90% fat. So I think ultimately is doing the research combined with experimenting and seeing what kind of sensation and having the power of will to transform towards better habits.
So you seem to know a lot about diet and how it helps your body. Do you do a lot of research regarding this? Have you done a lot of research
I've
regarding
done
this?
some, and I feel like always replenishing your knowledge, source of ideas, just the same way you have the opening preparation, the same way you study chess. I mean, I think it's just diet is very important for maintaining good energy, good exercise, in combination with good positive mindset. That'll make you a much better chess player as well.
Just one last question to you, Timur.
Hmm.
I've been following your games in this tournament, and sometimes you come out with the King's Gambit. The other day you play E4, C5, G6. So, is it your style to play unconventional chess? And how strongly do you recommend this to lower-rated players?
Well, I feel like if you get to explore your style, you define what kind of positions suit your style, and then at times if you like to mix that up, that could also enhance your, maybe just getting away from the normal, because normally I'm, primarily a D4 player, right? So I play a lot of the good strategic opening stuff, opening situations. But then also, this is something that I'd have to, constantly dedicate time and energy to maintain the opening preparation, and it's a little bit tough to do sometimes. Now, when you play something unconventional, that at times your opponent knows, and that sucks, right?
Yeah.
But potentially that could have the surprise effect and get you outside of your head with trying to think or remember certain opening lines. And I feel like just as a matter of experience, something that you can, if you feel like especially something is not going according to your plan. If everything is going according to your plan, then stick to your game. That's what you normally do. But otherwise you can try to mix it up and experiment a little bit.
The reason I asked you was because I had a conversation with a grandmaster from Mumbai. His name is Praveen Tipse, and I had asked him this question that when you talk of players like Zviagintsev or Badur Jobava, they are not quite at the very top, but the ones at the very top always play solidly. So why do you think? I mean, after Mikhail Tal, perhaps we haven't had a grandmaster who has played that unconventionally, who and has become the world champion. So,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on
I
this?
feel like there's a nowadays chess is a combination of a great strategic chess and really wild middle game with a lot of tactical skills. You have to demonstrate to be able to hold on. Ultimately, there's the best move in a situation, and despite your preferred style or maybe your strength in a situation, you have to be really well prepared in all aspects of the game.
All right, thank you for your time, Timur. And that's it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.